Even though the landscape still looks like winter, spring arrives officially on March 20th as the sun crosses the equator on its annual swing north. Unofficially, for most people, spring arrives when the first spring peepers begin to call and the first spring flowers begin to bloom in their gardens and local woodlands. Depending on where you live, this can be any time from early February in the most southern part of our eastern forest floral region to early May in Maine and Minnesota in the north, but the biological story is the same. For the very early wildflowers, there is not much time. These small plants on the forest floor must bloom in that brief time between the first warm sunny days of spring and the time the leaves come out on the forest trees a few weeks later. To do this, they have developed an interesting set of special features. First, all of the earliest spring wildflowers, such as bloodroot, are perennial. That is, they live and continue to grow for many years. Second, these plants that bloom very early, such as trout lily, all store up extra food, usually starch, either in their roots or in specialized underground stems called rhizomes, or in other modified underground storage structures called tubers, corms, or bulbs, which makes the rapid spring growth and flowering possible. In addition, perhaps to help protect the stored food from hungry forest animals, many of the roots and rhizomes of these plants also contain various bitter or poisonous chemical compounds, which are often of medical value. The rhizomes of bloodroot, for example, contain the bitter, bright red alkaloid sanguinarine that gives the plant its common name. The tempting starch-filled corm of jack-in-the-pulpit, also called Indian turnip, contains potentially lethal crystals of calcium oxalate, which the Indians removed by cooking. The poisonous rhizomes of mayapple contain several compounds of current medicinal value in the treatment of warts and one form of cancer. In addition, since rhizomes are modified stems, they grow and branch and can produce new plants. Often they grow very slowly over the years, but under ideal conditions, the slender rhizomes of mayapple may grow a foot or more in a summer. In only a few years, a single plant can spread to produce a large colony or a clone of genetically identical plants. And the final special feature of these very early plants is their very sensitive chemical thermometers that activate the growth process as soon as a few warm, sunny days in early spring have warmed the forest soil. Once winter dormancy is broken, the plants begin to grow, slowly at first, but then more quickly. In a few days, the first leaves appear, followed closely by the first flowers. Spring has arrived. The numerous plants that are adapted to the seasons now come up, bloom, set seed, store food for next year's growth, and go dormant in just a few short weeks. Because they are visible for such a short time each year, they are often called spring ephemerals, and along with other less ephemeral plants, make up what most people refer to as spring wildflowers. We hope you enjoy them. Hepatica, or liverleaf, is the first of the forest floor wildflowers to bloom. An inhabitant of rich woods on acidic soils, Hepatica gets its alternate name from the 3 lobes of the leaf reminiscent of the 3 lobes of the liver. A closely related species with pointed leaf lobes grows on drier basic soils throughout most of our region. The delicate windflower, also called rue anemone, is adapted to many types of dry to moist, open woodland habitats throughout our region. The related meadow rue also occurs on woodland slopes in early spring, but is far less conspicuous because the small flowers are adapted to wind pollination. The single flower on each stalk of wood anemone or thimbleweed readily distinguishes this species from the multiple flowered rue anemone. The spurred flowers of wild columbine are quite unlike others of the buttercup family. The rich nectar at the end of long spurs on the flower attracts the hummingbird pollinators. These native perennials are occasional in rich woods throughout our region, but they are very easy to grow from seed for massing in the wildflower garden. The rather rare but widespread wild larkspur is another distinctive member of the buttercup family. The spurred petals also conceal nectar, but for bees, not hummingbirds. Thirty or more species of buttercups are common in our region. The small-flowered buttercup, found in moist to dry woods or open roadsides, has very small flowers that often go unnoticed. The hooked buttercup of similar habitats has slightly larger flowers and gets its name from the hook on the end of the small one-seeded fruits. The tall buttercup, with typical showy buttercup flowers, is not native but is from Europe and well naturalized. It is more common in the mountains, where it grows in fields and along roadsides. The bulbous buttercup, perhaps our most showy buttercup, is also introduced but naturalized widely. This easy-to-grow species makes a good choice for the wild garden. Both the tall and bulbous buttercups form carpets of pure golden yellow in low fields, meadows, and pastures, especially in the mountain areas of our region. The common bluet is widespread throughout our region and forms cushions of colorful flowers dotted along roadsides and in open woodlands. The closely related mountain bluet is found from Pennsylvania to Georgia and is distinguished by its smaller, more intensely blue flowers, the creeping habit, and its more moist habitat. Bluets have thoroughly adapted to moist man-made clearings such as lawns, golf courses, and roadsides, where they are often found displayed with buttercups. Spring beauty may grow in small, scattered clumps or may form an almost solid carpet of white to pink bloom on the open forest floor in early spring throughout our eastern woodlands. The small, starch-filled underground stems, or corms, are eaten by native forest animals, but the introduced wild pigs allowed to roam the Great Smoky Mountain National Park threaten many large stands of this delicate perennial. In many areas, spring is characterized by the rich array of woodland flowers that belong to the lily family. A typical lily has flower parts in threes and characteristic fleshy, linear-veined leaves. However, as with the buttercup family, not all members of the lily family follow the typical form. The nodding yellow flowers with reflexed petals and wide mottled leaves distinguish trout lily or dogtooth violet, which is, along with hepatica and spring beauty, one of the earliest flowers to bloom on the forest floor. If left undisturbed for several decades, trout lily can literally carpet an entire hillside or floodplain and present a spectacular spring show, especially when growing with spring beauty. Trout lily is soon followed by the pale to rich yellows of the bellworts, well named for their drooping bell-like flowers. Bellworts are easily grown rhizomatous perennials that are sold by many native plant nurseries and form attractive clumps in the wildflower garden. All species have had extensive medicinal use in earlier times. The large-flowered bellwort is the most conspicuous of the bellworts. Its rich golden yellow flowers are 1 inch long, and the plant grows 2 to 3 feet tall, usually on basic or limestone soils in rich woods. The perfoliate-leaved bellwort has smaller pale yellow flowers and is only half as tall as its large-flowered relative. It often forms large colonies on more acid woodland soils. As the name implies, this bellwort has leaves which entirely encircle the stem. The leaves of the sessile-leaved bellworts do not encircle the stem. Two very similar species in our range are separated by growth habit and habitat moisture. The small white flowers of devilspit, or blazing star, are clustered in showy spikes and, unlike other members of the lily family, have male and female flowers separated on different plants. Interestingly, the two kinds of plants were once used medicinally for separate male and female ailments. Be sure to specify male plants for your wildflower garden, as they have the more attractive flower clusters. Trillium is both the common name and the scientific name for these easily recognized native rhizomatous perennials with 3 leaves and a single flower on each stalk. The distinctive smell, maroon flowers, and the mottled leaves quickly identify Little Sweet Betsy, also called wet dog trillium, referring to its characteristic pungent odor, which begins to bloom in mid-March in the southern Appalachians. A yellow form of Little Sweet Betsy is also common. This highly variable trillium occurs throughout the eastern deciduous forest region. The large-flowered trillium is perhaps our most plentiful trillium of rich woodland slopes, and in mid-spring, whole slopes can be dominated by these plants. The white flowers of the large-flowered trillium turn pink after they are pollinated, and later in the season, hillsides will be dotted with both pink and white blooms. The distinctively marked flowers of painted trillium distinguish the smaller flowered trillium, which grows in acid bogs and spruce or fir forests. The erect maroon flower of wake robin, or purple trillium, has a strong floral odor reflected in its descriptive alternate common name, stinking Benjamin. These plants grow on moist woodland slopes, primarily along the Appalachians, and despite their name, color variants include white, yellow, or green. Another name, birthwort, attests to one of the many prior medicinal uses of these plants. The stalk of the white flower of nodding trillium is bent downward, and the flower may thus be hidden under the broad leaves. This species is an infrequent find in late spring on basic or limestone soils, primarily in the southern Appalachians. Solomon's seal is perhaps our most widespread native spring wildflower. The 2 to 3 bell-shaped flowers, about 3/4 of an inch long at the base of each leaf, will always distinguish the true Solomon seal. The arching stems are usually 2 to 4 feet long, but, under garden conditions, may reach 6 to 8 feet. The rhizomes, once heavily collected for medicinal uses, can be an inch thick. The round blue fruits of Solomon seal will also distinguish this species in the fall. False Solomon seal, in contrast, has a relatively dense cluster of small white flowers at the end of the 2 to 3 foot long stalk. False Solomon seal is also widespread, but it does not get quite as far south as the true Solomon seal. And false Solomon seal has distinctive red fruits in the fall. The small, feathery, fragrant flowers and dark green leaves of false lily of the valley distinguish this broadly ranging species, which blooms in late spring to early summer. The flowers of speckled wood lily or Clinton's lily, found primarily in the higher Appalachian forests, are white, usually speckled with purple. Also look for the pale yellow flowers of the similar, more northerly distributed blue bead lily. Both the leaves and roots, or rhizomes of these plants, were used medicinally by Native American Indians. The leafy plants of yellow mandarin are 2 to 3 feet tall, and the delicate inch-long yellow-green flowers are easy to overlook. The bright orange-red berries, however, stand out even in the colorful autumn woods. Yellow mandarin is found in the rich hardwood forests of the Appalachians from New York to Georgia. Twisted stalk, named for the characteristic zigzag stem, grows in rich woods along the crest of the Appalachians. Another twisted stalk with similar range but with rose-colored flowers should also be looked for. The small, nodding greenish-yellow flowers of Indian cucumber are often hidden by the whorled leaves. The crisp, white, edible cucumber-flavored root gives the plant its common name. Indian cucumber is more conspicuous in the fall, when the round blue berries ripen above the leaves and the upper leaves turn red at their base. Bloodroot, with its pure white flowers 2 to 3 inches across, is one of the most striking and also one of our earliest and most widespread spring wildflowers. Trailing arbutus is another harbinger of spring for many people, blooming very early in dry to moist, often rocky woodlands throughout our region. This prostrate woody perennial has evergreen leaves, and the fragrant white flowers, often tinged with pink, appear with last year's leaves before the new leaves develop. Three closely related members of the fumwort family, all with rather feathery foliage and bilateral or zygomorphic flowers, are particularly well-known components of our spring woodland slopes. Since the petals of the fumwort flowers are not all the same size and shape and are not arranged in a uniform circle, the flower has a distinct top and bottom or east and west orientation and is said to be bilateral or zygomorphic rather than round or radial in symmetry. Dutchman's breeches, aptly named for the two elongated spurs of the flowers, will briefly carpet large areas of the rich spring slopes. The flowers of squirrelcorn lack the extended spurs of Dutchman's breeches, but vegetatively these species are identical. Squirrelcorn is so named because of its small, fleshy, corn-like yellowish tubers. Bleeding Heart is the less ephemeral of the fumworts and may continue to bloom well on into summer or even early fall. For this reason, it is highly recommended for the wildflower garden. Yellow fumwort, or corydalus, is a low annual that grows from seed each year. This species is more frequent in open areas or along woodland margins and is easy to grow in a garden. Mayapple, or mandrake, is easily recognized by its single or paired, round-lobed, umbrella-like leaves, often 8 to 12 inches across. The solitary waxy white flowers are about 1 inch across and are produced only between the paired leaves. Umbrella leaf is a less widespread relative of mayapple that grows only in the cool, moist mountain woodlands of the southern Appalachians. It has rather awesome leaves that may be nearly 2 feet across. The flowers are not solitary as in mayapple, but are in clusters between the paired upper leaves. The small greenish-yellow flowers and divided leaves easily distinguish blue cohosh from other members of the barberry family. The bluish cast to stem and leaves gives this plant its common name. A large array of medicinal uses were ascribed to the roots of blue cohosh in early American folk remedies. The distinctive leaves of twin leaf divided into 2 almost equal halves, and the white flowers borne singly on the long flower stalks immediately identify this rather rare early spring wildflower of rich woods and limestone soils. Squaw root, or cancer root, is parasitic on the roots of several kinds of trees in rich woods throughout our region. These interesting plants are completely dependent on their hosts for nutrients, as their leaves are reduced to small brown scales incapable of photosynthesis. The distinctive cross-shaped, four-petaled white flowers of the toothworts are characteristic of the mustard family. Several species of these native perennials are common among the earliest wildflowers on the rich spring slopes. Even though many of the introduced and now thoroughly naturalized crucifer species are annuals and are among our most prolific lawn, garden, and roadside weeds, several species, such as wintercress, provide brilliant displays in early spring, and when massed in an old field or along a roadside, can give a bright flash of color to the late winter or early spring landscape. Dame's Rocket, an escaped and now naturalized old-time garden plant with showy 1-inch pink or white flowers, can also add considerable color along the roadsides in mid to late spring. The plants are 3 to 4 feet tall with many branches and many flowers, so even a single plant will get your attention. Many members of the mustard or cabbage family can be partly identified by their cabbage smell. However, garlic mustard, a weedy introduced mustard with small white cruciform flowers and broad triangular toothed leaves, is rapidly spreading in eastern forests and woodlands. As its name implies, the plants smell like garlic. One of the better-known spring wildflowers of moist deciduous woods throughout our region is the widespread jack-in-the-pulpit, which has a most interesting floral form. The minute unisexual flowers are separately clustered on a stalk or spadix, jack, which is protected by a leafy spathe, the pulpit. Skunk cabbage is one of the first plants to bloom, often in early February in the southern part of its range. Like jack-in-the-pulpit, it also has tiny flowers embedded in a short spadix and protected by a red to green spathe. The spathe provides shelter and some meager warmth for the insects that pollinate the flowers. Skunk cabbage is not a forest plant, but a plant of open bogs and meadows that gets its common name in part from the distinctive odor of the large cabbage-like leaves visible in late spring and early summer. Oconee bells, or shortia, is one of our rarest and earliest spring wildflowers. It once grew under the rhododendron, along a few mountain streams, but as the streams have been dammed to form lakes for power, the habitat has been destroyed. Fortunately, the showy plant is rather widely cultivated, and with care, it will not become extinct. Shooting star, with its fleshy basal leaves and cluster of white flowers at the end of a long flowering stem, is an easily recognized inhabitant of rich, moist woodlands with basic or neutral soils. Easily cultivated, shooting star can provide a stunning addition to the spring wildflower garden where moisture is plentiful. The large dark blue flowers of dwarf iris, with its distinctive orange band on each of the 3 petal-like sepals, is one of the few early blooming attractors of queen bumblebees, which are its primary pollinator. The crested dwarf iris has paler blue flowers and a distinctive crest on each sepal. These rhizomatous perennials make excellent subjects for the wildflower garden, where the clumps get larger and more showy each year. One or more of our 10 species of blue-eyed grass, all easy to grow in the wild garden, can be found in open woodlands, clearings, moist meadows, and along roadsides throughout our region. The 2 to 3 foot stems of bluebell or Virginia cowslip are found in moist or wet woodlands. The large blue funnel-shaped flowers are usually pink in bud and later turn pink again after pollination. The usually solitary flower of yellow stargrass is on a short stalk, only about half as long as the grass-like leaves. These low perennials often grow in old paths or wagon wheel ruts in open woodlands throughout our region and are another good plant for the wild garden. Our native lady slippers are perhaps our most spectacular spring wildflowers and certainly our most interesting representatives of the orchid family. Wide-ranging but in scattered localities and nowhere frequent, they are more abundant in the northern half of our region. The basal leaves of pink lady slipper or moccasin flower will distinguish this orchid even when not in flower. These unique flowers, as for all lady slippers, are interesting lures and traps for pollinating bees. The pale to bright yellow flowers of the yellow lady slipper, which has a leafy stem, are smaller than those of the pink lady slipper. The longer twisted sepals of the yellow lady slipper are also distinctive. A smaller form of the yellow lady slipper has sepals which are darker purple. The showy lady slipper, our largest and most spectacular native orchid, is also known as queen lady slipper or pink and white lady slipper. It grows in our more northerly areas in low, wet woods. All of these beautiful native orchids have been collected almost to extinction over much of their range in eastern North America and are now quite rare. However, where their woodland habitats are protected, the natural colonies continue to grow and may produce spectacular shows of 100 or more flower stalks each spring. Flowers of the little showy orchis, usually only 3 to 4 inches high, have a distinctive hood which may vary in color from pale to deep rose. The third petal forms the white lower lip of the zygomorphic flower. The large whorled begonia is really not very large. The delicate plants with their single triangulate flower are only a few inches tall. These interesting rare little orchids grow on acid soils in open woodlands and clearings at widely scattered localities throughout our range. All of our native orchids are perennials and have very specialized nutritional pathways that involve specific soil fungi. They are extremely difficult or impossible to transplant and should never be dug from the wild. Please leave them for others to enjoy. Foam flower is common throughout our region in rich woods. It was used by Native American Indians to prepare a medicinal tea, and it has long been grown as a border plant in English gardens. The small white flowers of saxifrage are reminiscent of foam flower, but the flower stalk is branched and much more diffuse. This saxifrage, which grows on wet cliffs and along mountain streams in the middle part of our region, is typical of the other species of saxifrage found throughout our region in late spring and early summer. Bishop's cap, or mitrewort, gets its name from the cap-like structure of the very tiny flowers. Wild strawberry is closely related to our cultivated strawberry, but the tasty fruits are much smaller. Large colonies of wild strawberry may form by means of stolons, or long arching stems that touch the ground and take root. Also called cinquefoil, five fingers is common in open woodlands and along roadsides from early spring to early summer. It is named for the leaves, which have 5 distinct leaflets, all coming from one point at the end of the leaf stalk or petiole. For several thousand years, plants and their flowers have been woven into the mythology, legend, and culture of the world's civilizations. And violets have been included in our music, art, medicine, cuisine, horticulture, and official state prerogatives. Violets are the state flower of Illinois, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and Wisconsin. Most of the 50 or more species of violets in our region are woodland perennials, but there is considerable variation in habitat, and there are also a few introduced annual species. All violets are excellent prospects for the wild garden with soils to meet their needs. The wood violet, or early blue violet, is common in woodlands throughout our region and is easy to recognize by the very distinctive shape of its leaves. The common purple violet, or meadow violet, is, as its name implies, quite common in moist openings or low wet woods and fields throughout our region. The flower may rarely be white or variegated. The blue marsh violet, as the name suggests, is found in bogs and wet areas, primarily in our more mountainous regions. Not all violet flowers are blue. They may be yellow, as in the halberd-leaved yellow violet, a plant of moist deciduous woods which has leaves on the same stem with the flower. Another yellow violet, also with a leafy stem, is the smooth yellow violet of low open woods and meadows throughout our region. The white-flowered Canada violet also has leafy flower stems and is our most recognized violet, inhabiting the rich woodland slopes of early spring. Native American Indians made a medicinal tea from the roots of this violet. The sweet white violet does not have any leaves on the flower stalk and is most often found in the loose soil and heavy shade of more northern evergreen forests. The birdfoot violet is so named for its finely divided leaves, which some think look like a bird foot. It is found in dry open woods or on open road banks, often in relatively poor soil. The birdfoot violet usually has large light lavender blue flowers. However, some plants may have very attractive bicolored flowers in which the upper two petals are dark purple. Lyre-leaved sage is named for the distinctive basal leaves that form a winter rosette from which grows the 12 to 18-inch flowering stems. This weedy perennial is common in open woodlands and along roadsides. The bright red star-shaped flowers of fire pink, about 1 inch across with deeply notched petals, are so distinctive that only a single glance at these brilliant blooms is needed for positive identification. There is nothing else like them. Indian pink, as it is also sometimes called, is a perennial that grows in dry to moist open woodlands and on open road banks throughout our region south of New England. The closely related Carolina pink also has a color to match its name, though it may sometimes have pure white flowers. These low, almost prostrate perennials are conspicuous when in bloom on shale barrens and open road banks wherever limestone or calcareous soils occur in our floristic region. The giant chickweed, unlike its close relative, the weedy chickweed of lawns and gardens, is a very attractive native perennial found in rich woods. Despite the name, the plant is usually less than a foot tall and is an ideal plant for the woodland garden. climbing or trailing coral honeysuckle, or trumpet honeysuckle, begins blooming in early spring and continues through midsummer, providing an important nectar source for hummingbirds. Coral honeysuckle is found in open woodlands and thickets, generally at lower elevations. Blue phacelia, also called fernleaf, is native to the woodland slopes and creek banks in the southern half of our region. It is not a perennial, but a biennial, or 2-year plant that reseeds itself each year after blooming and then dies down. This very attractive plant is an excellent choice for the wild flower garden, where it can literally carpet a large area of open woodland. The small-flowered phacelia is a low-growing annual with white flowers that reseeds every year. It can also form large mats or patches along roadsides or woodland margins. The distinctive fringed petals quickly identify fringed phacelia. Also known as Miami mist, this annual phacelia is found in rich, moist woods, meadows, and roadsides. The flowers of wild geranium may vary in color from a rich rose purple to a very pale pink. Darker flowers seem to be associated with more open road banks where the plants get more light. The roots of this 2 to 3 foot tall native perennial are rich in tannins and have had a number of medicinal uses in earlier times. There are several species of perennial rhizomatous aromatic wild ginger to be found in the eastern forests. The more northern Canada wild ginger has broad kidney-shaped or reniform leaves that are rather thin, pale green and which die back in winter. The small reddish-brown 3-parted flowers, about an inch across, occur singly between the paired leaves. Because the flowers are often lost in the leaf litter, this plant is best recognized by its attractive leaves. The thick, heart-shaped leaves of the wild gingers of the southern Appalachians are evergreen. Although slow-growing, these plants make interesting plants for the wild garden. The distinctively shaped fleshy brown flowers of little brown jug or heartleaf are about an inch long and are often referred to as little pigs. They are clustered at the base of the leaf stalks and are usually covered with dead leaves from the forest trees. The flowers of the large-flowered heartleaf are about 1 inch long as well and clustered at the base of the plant, often under leaf litter, but they are also an inch or more in diameter. Dutchman's pipe, or pipe vine, is a high-climbing woody vine with distinctive pipe-shaped flowers that are over an inch long. The large, 4 to 8 inch, heart-shaped leaves also easily identify this plant of the mountains. The small perennial plants of wood sorrel, also known as sourgrass or oxalis, contain crystals of oxalic acid and are often chewed by children for the mild sting they give. 1 or more of our yellow-flowered species occur in rich woodlands and clearings in each state in our region. Some species are rather weedy, but the violet wood sorrel with its bright half-inch flowers provide colorful patches to the spring garden. The 3-lobed shamrock-like leaves are easily recognizable with the flowers in spring and again in the fall when a second minor flowering period occurs. The The meadow parsnips, or golden alexanders, are common spring-blooming members of the carrot family with tiny yellow flowers grouped in loose to tight clusters. This compact-flowered golden meadow parsnip is common in rich deciduous woodlands essentially throughout our floristic region. The more loosely flowered woodland alexander is common and widespread in open deciduous forests of our southern states. The closely related and more colorful golden alexander, on the other hand, is found in moist fields, meadows, and low open woods. Golden alexander is a rhizomatous perennial that can form large colonies, sometimes extending over entire fields. However, it can easily be contained in the wild garden. Sweet Cicely, or anise root, up to 3 feet tall, is common in moist woodlands throughout our region. The stem and roots of these plants emit a licorice or anise-like odor when crushed. Indian paintbrush is a widespread but infrequent semi-parasitic annual that grows in association with and is parasitic on various species of grasses. The 3-pointed crimson-tipped bracts, or leaf-like appendages just below each of the numerous zygomorphic flowers in the flower spike, provide much of the stunning color, and when it is found growing in a low meadow with golden alexander, the sight can be spectacular. The compact spikes of clustered maroon or yellow flowers and the rosette of dark green lobed leaves make lousewort or wood betony a most attractive woodland perennial. Unfortunately, these plants cannot be transplanted, so they must be grown from seed or purchased from a nursery if you want them in your wildflower garden. The flowers of beard tongue or penstemon are not as strongly two-lipped as those of lousewort or Indian paintbrush, but they are clearly bilateral or zygomorphic, as are the flowers of all members of the figwort family. A dozen or more species of beard tongue get into our region at various places, mostly in the south and west. All are perennials and all make good garden plants in their respective areas. Blue phlox is native to rich, moist, deciduous woods throughout our region. It can spread by seed or by stolons and is an attractive perennial for the wildflower garden. The mat-forming creeping phlox is found in open woods and along stream banks. A good draw for butterflies, this species is a wonderful candidate for the wildflower garden. The delicate blue, lavender, or white flowers of robin's plantain, a spring-blooming member of the aster family, are really clusters of many very small flowers grouped tightly together into a compact head. The flowers in the center of the head are called disc flowers, while each of the small flowers around the edge of the head has a single large strap-shaped petal, or ray, and these are called ray flowers. Robin's plantain is native to open woodlands and is common in our region, where it is often found in large patches on road banks and other man-made openings. It is also a good choice for the native garden. The long leafy stems of golden ragwort, another spring member of the aster family, may be 2 feet or more tall and bear many small but colorful heads of yellow flowers. Large clumps of these native perennials are often found in wet woods, pastures, and meadows throughout our range. Ragworts are excellent plants for early color in the woodland garden. The European dandelion, originally introduced into American gardens as a border plant, is a truly aggressive weed now well established in lawns and open areas throughout our region, and indeed most of the continent. But to some, it is still attractive, especially in early spring. Unlike robin's plantain and golden ragwort, the head of the dandelion is made up of all ray flowers. Each of these flowers then produces a single seed with a feather-like plume for wind dispersal. The last in our series of spring wildflowers is gaywings, or fringed polygala, one of our most colorful wildflowers. Gaywings is a relatively rare native perennial, only 2 to 3 inches tall, that grows in cool northern or high mountain forests. Once you find it, you will know it immediately. The 1-inch flower is half the size of the 2-inch plant. We hope you have enjoyed our review of some of the spring wildflowers of the eastern forest region, and that you will want to see some of the equally beautiful wildflowers that bloom in the summer and fall, such as butterfly weed, black-eyed Susan, New England aster, and gray goldenrod, and some of the striking flowers of our many native trees and shrubs.